Welcome to Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, back again with my special guest co-host, Michael. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about how prison affects the employees, the people that work here, y'all. I think this is going to be a good episode. But before we get started, like I always do, I want to ask Michael, does he have anything that he wants to say before we kick this off?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me again. This is an interesting topic because, it does affect people when they leave from here. Because
people that work here.
People that work here.
Yeah.
You got to think about it because the word prisonized doesn't just affect people that are incarcerated.
Yeah.
It affects those who come in here too.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you feel that way because I really want to get into this because most of the time people are talking about how prison affects the people in it, the people that live here, right? I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about, in this particular way, talk about how prison affects the people that work here. Daily, they have to deal with the training that they receive to come in here to work that tells them to do what? See us different. How do they see us different? They see us different because they say to them in training, and I know this because I've been around a long time and I've talked to several people that have worked in the system for years, and they say that they train them to not trust us. They train them not to listen to anything that we say. They say if we're opening our mouth, we're usually lying. They train them in ways to treat us in a way that is dehumanizing. Now think about that now. You take a person that raised by their family, however they were raised in their household, I'm pretty sure that nobody was raised, these people that work here, they were not initially raised to be cruel to people. Now, I'm sure that some people that might listen to this might take exception to me using the word cruel when I talk about the training, but look, I'm on the other end of that and I say that's cruel. So I've always wondered how it affects them. So the other day, just in passing, I really didn't let them know what I was doing, but I said, how long have you been working here? And this particular person said X amount of years. I'm not going to give you any information that would potentially expose who I'm talking about, but they didn't even know that I was asking these questions for a specific reason. And I said, during all of that time, has it changed the way you see the world? And they were like, yes. And I'm like, how? And they said they see the world more cold. They're not as trusting as they were before they started working here. They don't trust people outside of prison the same way that they see us. They said they see their, people in their families like this, people in society like that. And it got me to really thinking about, how did that happen and where did that come from? That training that they received to treat us a certain way that they say needs to be done to run a prison, it bleeds over into their personal life. I don't see how it couldn't. You know what I mean? What do you think about that, Mike?
Well, the training in itself creates a caste system within society. So we are, like you said, dehumanizing people. People know that they committed a crime. They don't have to be reminded of it every day by not being trusted. But don't get me wrong. They do have to have that because there are people that will manipulate and do certain things that they're being trained for. But you have to be, as a human being, know how to discern the difference in those people.
It's a difference in people being told, look, watch out for some of the people in there, all of the people in there, because they might try to manipulate you because they want their freedom, they want the niceties of life, and they're going to be restricted from having it. So watch out for them. That's one thing. But it's another thing to say, okay, if we get into a situation, you treat this person like this. You feel what I'm saying? Like when they get into a situation where we might be a little rowdy, right? And they have to take us down. I am almost certain that there is no law that allows people that work in prison to beat the hell out of somebody in prison. I can't believe that they train them to do that. They train them to subdue us, right? Once they have us, put in, once they have control of the situation, the beating is supposed to stop, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we all know that does not happen.
No, they're not going to let that happen.
No.
It's going to keep going.
No. And then the other ways that they dehumanize us. I understand why they got to have strip searches. I get that. You don't want people smuggling in things into the prison that could cause harm to the population or the people that work here, right? But then they go overboard and they say, okay, squat and call. And then they want you to spread your cheeks so they can actually look up in your rectum.
And you got
I'm sure they don't train them to do that.
You got something worse that even take a flashlight, you know, so
And put it all up in there.
Yeah, so it's yeah.
So that I don't think they train them in doing that, but that becomes the way that everybody does it, because that particular person will train the person coming behind him or them to do the same thing. And that has to have an effect on the mind. And then also, when you watch somebody in prison getting stabbed, most people can go through their whole lives and never see anybody get killed, right?
Yeah.
Never see anybody getting hurt in that way, right? But in prison, the chances of you seeing that are increased.
But isn't this what the person signed up for, though? If you come to work in a prison, it's got to be a violent place.
But exactly. But because they signed up for it, doesn't mean they won't be affected by it. You feel what I'm saying?
No,
Now, what I want to get to, I want to pivot just a little bit when I talk about, how they are affected by watching the way we treat each other, right? Do we have a responsibility in the way we should act in regards to how it might affect the people that work?
For me, I say that we should act accordingly, period, regardless if it's for the people that work here or for our to better ourselves. We shouldn't be acting like animals. Because, like, for me, if I need to be treated accordingly. When I say accordingly, by the way that I act. If I am around here doing dumb stuff, then treat me like that. But if I'm following the rules, doing what I'm supposed to do, I'll say, like I said before, I work outside the fence. I could come in every day without being strip searched, and they'd never have to worry about anything coming in with it. But it's part of it because you got people that'll bring stuff in. So, but I'm not the one. I'm not the one that's going to do that. So I'm acting accordingly. So we should be able to be trusted. That's the whole thing about trustee. We should be trusted to go out and come back and not smuggle. But we don't have that. So I don't think that we can expect everybody to, or even the majority of the people to act accordingly to think about the next person, because people still have that mindset that they're not thinking about the next person.
But don't you think that should be part of the mindset of somebody that's trying to change, thinking about their fellow man?
Almost definitely. For a person that's changing, for the person that wants to do right, yes, you absolutely have to think about the next man, because the Bible tells us that we have to have love amongst ourselves. So right. If I treat you in a disrespectful manner or any other kind of way contrary to what I'm practicing, then I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
So I wonder, where does that mindset come from, where when we come into prison, we think that we're supposed to act a certain way towards the people that work here because they work here? What do you think that comes from?
It comes from the old days. That was them versus us. It was always that. It was always that mentality. Yeah. We have to stick together, and they think the same thing too.
They stick
as far as the officers, they have to stick together. Right or wrong, they're riding together.
Yeah, right or wrong. I think that's one of the main sticking points when it comes to, in my opinion, true and lasting, effective reform.
Yes,
I do. That wall that has us going us versus them, it's in the way of, me possibly listening to and taking to heart what somebody that's working here says to me. You know what I'm saying? They could be telling me the God's honest truth and something that can better my life, but because they are on the other side, I'm less likely to listen to what they're saying unless I've developed some type of rapport with them. You know what I mean? And I think that's something that we need to work on. I think that when you see people that work in an institution suffering the same way that you're suffering, I don't understand how is it that we don't respond to that in a humane way. It's always, we think about mostly, like I said at the beginning of this episode, we mostly think about how the person that's incarcerated is treated and how it affects them. And we don't think about how it affects the people that actually work in these places. Don't get it twisted. I'm not making excuses for people that work here, because some of the things that they do, it's just flat out wrong. You know what I mean? It's just flat out wrong. And they should be held accountable for that. But it's hard for me to understand how, a person that is being subjected to the type of things that they're subjected to on a daily basis. Think about this now, like, if you're in prison and you're not the ones that's involved in all the wildness, but you're an observer of it, right?
Yeah.
You're an observer. You see that you're not in the games, you're not doing it, but you see all of this stuff going on, and it's driving you crazy because you have nowhere to go. Now, for 8 hours, they're stuck here too, right? And they see this, even though they can leave and come home, go home and come back. For 8 hours, they're stuck here to see all of the madness, to hear all of the manipulation. And as an observer of this, it's hard for me to understand why I can't look at them and be like, man, I get it. I see why you act like that. Because what that does, what happens with people, that see things like that and that experience things like that, that makes these employees, in my opinion, become jaded.
Oh yeah, it does.
And they become numb. And that leads, in my opinion, to a bad employee. And that's what I wanted to get to with this episode. That leads to a bad employee. That leads to somebody that doesn't care about the humanity of another individual. They probably didn't start out like that, but they become that. And that leads to a worse outcome for the people in prison. And what do you say about that?
I totally agree, because when you see new officers, new staff, or whatever coming in, they may come in gung-ho and wanting to help us. And one person has wronged them, and their whole outlook changes. Their whole outlook changes on the whole thing.
Right.
So I can definitely see the actions of the incarcerated affecting the actions of staff.
Right.
To make them want to change the way that they are.
Right. Yeah. And that's real stuff, man. That's real stuff. I just wanted to touch on that, man, because that's not something that we normally would, talk about on the podcast, and it's not something that I normally hear being discussed out there. How, this particular career, this particular profession, how it affects the people, that work here. I just wanted to touch on that real quick, man. Just to give y'all something out there to think about, when you talk about your loved ones in prison and what they're going through. Think about the people that work in these places too now. Don't get it twisted. They should be held accountable for all the nonsense that they might get involved with, from time to time. But think about that. Think about what they go through and what they take home with them every day. The sacrifices that they're making, to try to make the world a better place for all of us. Think about that. You know what I mean? Don't get it twisted now. Don't get it twisted. They still need to be held accountable when they do stupid stuff. But I think that we need to look at them in a different way, because they are experiencing, for the most part, the same thing that we are experiencing in here just by working here. You know what I mean? Got anything else you want to say about that, Mike, before we close this out?
Be kind to each other.
Be kind to each other. All the way around. That's the best thing right there. I'm going to end it with that. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, the Crime Critic. Peace, y'all.